Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today, we're going to be breaking down another beat I made. This one, we're going to have a little bit more emphasis and focus on the melody. I made this melody straight after Nick Mira released a new video, probably the first video in a while that I've seen. I got inspired and I was like, I'm going to go straight in and I'm going to cook up. And this is what I made. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first sound I used was Nexus. We've got this Sally pluck sound. We have the following effects on it. Just have a high pass filter cutting out the really low frequencies, a decapitator for a little bit of saturation, quite a long tail reverb with some stereo separation, tail filter with some sidechain action, and I've also got halftime here for a little bit of variation. I automate the mix level in the arrangement. Yeah, I'm gonna break down the MIDI here. So basically this is just a 4-bar loop that's repeated, minus this single F note here. We'll focus on the first half and you'll be able to figure out how this works. So we're in A sharp minor, and for the first bar here, we're just playing A sharp, which is the root note of the scale, and C sharp, which is the third, and we've got this run of notes at F, which is the fifth. So basically, if you invert these notes, you'll see that this is an arpeggiated A sharp minor chord, and that structure holds for the first 2 bars. And basically the melody, I just went by ear, whatever I thought sounded good. Note we've actually switched from quarter peak grid to triplet for those notes because I think it does provide a lot of bounce. And I think when you sprinkle in a little bit of this into not only your melodies but your drums as well, it makes it super fire. So we've got the first chord here, and then we have a triplet roll with the descending melody coming into this second A sharp minor chord that's broken up with, again, these other notes for melody again. These are just 2 descending triplet tones ending on the 5th, which is the F. Now keep in mind when I'm making this, I'm not thinking about it necessarily in terms of music theory outside of when I write the chords. My process is basically put chords down, arpeggiate it, and then start clicking in notes for melodies and whatever sounds good I sort of stick with. Or usually when you start placing notes, your brain starts to create a melody, and basically I try my best just to put that into MIDI and sort of follow what my ear is telling me, if that makes sense. That's the first 2 bars. Basically, it just revolves around that A sharp. And then as we move on to the second 2 bars, it's actually pitched down to this F sharp. You see the root note of the chords is pitched down, but most of what is in the first half is transferred over so that it's still familiar, but it's got variation on top of the first 2 bars, if that makes sense. And you'll see here as well, we've got these triplets coming into the chord change, as well as these descending notes here. But you see we do finish on the 5th of each of the chords for the melody, which gives it a nice powerful semi-resolution, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's pretty much how the MIDI works. This is what it sounds like. I think the triplet bounce, the reverb, the side chain, so like the pumping, sounds really good. And I've also messed with the velocity quite a lot. You'll see that when I highlight these notes, they're quite low in velocity. So these top melody triplet notes are further underneath because I didn't want them to be too far up in your face and distracting. But yeah, pretty fire. I will say this is one of my favorite melodies that I've made to date. Moving on to Addictive Keys now, this is just a slightly different version of the original melody. You'll see the chord structure is exactly the same. However, I've removed a lot of the top notes and I've changed some of the melody in the lower register so that it has counter melody, but it's in a different frequency ranges. You saw in the last pattern that the melody was in a higher octave than this one here, and that just helps the listener hear both at the same time. This is what the keys sound like. Very nice. This acts as a nice layer, and also I've pitched it up an octave here to give it a nice break from the original. But finally, I've just come to Electro X, so I've got this bell preset. And I'm just playing this very basic melody that's really tucked in the back. You wouldn't really hear it unless you know it's here. It's one of those things where it's more felt than heard. It sounds like this. You can kind of hear the similarities between that melody and the past patterns that I've showed. They all play off each other, but they each have their own flavor and their own color. But that's it for the melody. I'm going to move on to the drums now. Got the classic Audi 808. It's just playing the root notes of the chords. You remember from the first pattern, in the first 2 bars, we've got A sharp as a root note, and then we move up to F. We actually move down to F sharp, but because this pattern is already quite low, I pitched it up an octave. And right for the end, for a little bit of variation, we just go down to F for a triplet roll. I love doing this for my 808s. It sounds clean, but make sure you cut your 808s to themselves so they don't overlap when you have these close together notes. Before I play the 808, I also use this kick. I'm just going to play them together so you can hear them both in context. We've got this clap, playing the super standard clap pattern. This open hat, hitting on the 1 and the 6, if that makes sense. I have this crash, and it just hits on the 1. I have the same crash that's reversed, and that plays in the beginning too, but it sort of sucks up or reverses into the clap, which results in a very nice effect. I couldn't get it to cut off at the right time, so what I did is I put down the original note, and then I put down another note where I wanted it to stop. I just turned this note's velocity down to 0 so that you wouldn't hear it. And because when I right clicked here and it's selected to cut itself, when this note plays, it stops this note from playing, and because this note has 0 velocity, it plays nothing. So effectively you've got a note that cuts off exactly where you want it to. There are multiple different ways of doing this, but this was just the way I did it this time. Another way is just playing with the envelope here. For basses and 808s, I usually turn the attack all the way down, the hold all the way up, and all the other ones all the way down like this. And this can also ensure that in the piano roll, the sound only plays where the note is. Finally, we've got this hi-hat. Just playing this pretty simple hi-hat MIDI. Note we've got more triplet rolls down the bottom here. We're in 1/3 step grid. Yeah, sounds like this. We've got this basic riser that I use a lot. I just use that usually around the hook, add a little bit more emphasis. But yeah, those are all the sounds. In terms of arrangement, we've got 16 bar intro, 16 bar hook, and as always, we have a 24 bar verse. This is a basic structure that I follow almost every time in my beats. Where it differs is what sounds I play in what sections, and the beat cuts that I use from beat to beat changes. So you can see here in the intro, I've cut the 5th and 8th bar leading into the hook of the hi-hat just for a little bit of bounce. I like the way it sounded. And then I do this quite often as I cut the last bar of the drums out before the second half of the verse. And then I introduce the kick. You'll notice that the kick isn't anywhere in the beginning here. This is just so the second half of the hook punches really hard. Also in the hook, sometimes I pitch up the main melody an octave to bring the energy up, because you want the hook to have the highest energy in the track. And then moving into the verse, usually I keep the main melody, but I cut 1 or 2 bars out of the front of the drums so that it stops, and then it sort of drops back in. But the main difference between the hook and the verse is there's not as many sounds, so it's a lower energy. And basically for this middle section, you can do really whatever you want. Well, you can do pretty much whatever you want anyway, but what I like to do is I pretty much do anything for this middle section, and then I focus on building it back up into the hook again for the last section of the verse here. But yeah, pretty standard. I'm going to go ahead and play the full beat now, but I want to thank everyone for watching. If you like the video, subscribe if you want to see more content, hit the bell notification to be notified next time I post a video. I procrastinated a long time before I recorded this, but I'm glad I did, and I hope you're glad that you're seeing it, because I put a lot of effort in these videos, and I do enjoy putting them out. So that's going to be it. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, I'll see you in the next video. I love you.